Although Yellowjackets Season 3 has officially seen Coach Ben Scott rejoin the others, his fate in 12 angry girls and one drunk Travis is raising the possibility of a sinister scenario. In Episode 4 of Season 3 of Yellowjackets, the young survivors are put on trial to determine whether or not their coach committed attempted murder. In a technical sense, the team is attempting to determine whether Ben attempted to set the cabin on fire in Yellowjackets. Many survivors have already persuaded themselves that Ben is a villain in their survival narrative, even though the show has presented sufficient information to establish that he wasn't the culprit. Coach Scott helped save Shauna, Van, and Akila during their delusion in Yellowjacket Season 3, revealing that the cave was filled with toxic gas. The group was essentially pursuing Ben after Mari disclosed his whereabouts and described how she was being held captive. Ben would most likely not have been able to find another place to stay, even if he had any warning. Therefore, his abduction was inevitable. Of all, he presumably didn't anticipate being the subject of a rigorous trial, which makes a graphic scenario about his destiny more likely. The reason behind Coach Scott's guilty decision in Yellowjackets Season 3. The group concludes that a trial is the best way to fairly decide Coach Scott's fate shortly after he is brought to the survivors' new camp. Because she is an antler queen, Natalie is the judge, and Taysa is responsible for the prosecution, while Misty is responsible for Ben's defense. Misty is hesitant to defend Ben at first, but she comes to the conclusion that he probably wasn't the one who set the cabin on fire. Ben gives his side of the tale, saying he would never do anything to hurt the group, but sadly, Travis and the other girls are harder to persuade. The votes, however, are not in his favor. Natalie concludes that a two-thirds majority of votes is required to reach a decision. Shauna doesn't actually threaten to convict Coach Scott of attempted murder until she enters her plea. His admission that he was terrified of the gang and felt bad about abandoning them during a difficult moment suggests that his evidence is honest. But after Travis, Lottie, and a few others are influenced by Shauna and maybe it, Natalie is forced to convict Ben. The decision will have a significant impact on Ben's future in Yellowjackets, notwithstanding the theatricality of the fake trial. Now that the trial is over, what will the survivors do with Ben? With tears in her eyes, Natalie has Van return their prisoner to the pen where he was previously restrained after finding Coach Scott guilty of attempted murder. Misty is also disappointed by the decision, but Nat is taking it particularly hard because she attempted to assist Coach Scott by keeping the others in the dark about his location. She knows deep down that their coach wouldn't have attempted to harm them, even though the secret may have come back to haunt her when it was revealed during the trial. After the trial, Natalie will have a much more challenging job because the Antler Queen will probably be tasked with determining Coach Scott's actual fate. Coach Scott might be kept alive by the survivors as a prisoner and given tasks to complete around the camp. However, because the majority of the group doesn't trust him, someone would always need to be keeping an eye on him. Additionally, he adds another mouth to feed, and finding food is already difficult. Ben might, of course, attempt to use the survival gear he discovered in the hole to bargain for a lighter sentence. Given that Yellowjackets has already affirmed the group's readiness to sacrifice other survivors, there's also a risk that the others will pressure Natalie to think about giving Coach Scott the death penalty. How the trial verdict in Yellowjackets Season 3 maintains a well-liked Coach Scott theory. As time passes, it is increasingly likely that Coach Scott will die in the Yellowjackets timeline from the 1990s. For starters, there is no proof that Ben's character survives the wilderness because he hasn't been seen or acknowledged in the show's alternate chronology. Although it seems quite unlikely given that he ends up as a prisoner, it is always possible that Ben's survival will be revealed as some kind of surprising twist in Yellowjackets. A dark Yellowjackets scenario featuring Coach Scott is still tenable because the character is viewed as guilty, at least by the majority. According to the hypothesis, at some point in the 90s timeline, the young survivors will devour Coach Scott alive in Yellowjackets Season 3. It would be hilarious for the group to feast on Coach Scott after he left them, because of their willingness to consume human flesh, especially because cannibalism is still a possibility for them if needed. Eating someone like Ben, who was once a source of authority and protection both before and after the plane accident, would serve as further evidence of how the survivors' humanity has diminished the longer they have been stranded in the wilderness.